And welcome back. Joining me now is Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Dingell of Michigan. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us here on Meet the Press Now. Let's start with Graham Platner. As we've mentioned, a number of Democrats have called on him to drop out of the race. Do you agree? Should he drop out?
So, Gabe, good to be with you. And many people know that I raised concerns as early as May. Yes, I do think that he should drop out. And I've been very clear. I'm not a voter in Maine. I'm a voter in Michigan. But I had very serious concerns in May. And when someone's had a pattern, which this has been, people need to listen. And, you know, I said to people, I didn't sleep last night because I keep thinking we're making progress. But why, again, did everybody give a hard time to their survivors who talked about what happened to them? And I want to see someone in the United States Senate representing Maine that is willing to stand up to the president and isn't going to be a rubber stamp. But I've had concerns for months. Some of the people that, quite frankly, yelled at me for saying what I said have now said he should step aside. And I think we need to take a long, hard look at why it took 2 months to get to where we are today.
Sounds like you're really wrestling with this.
Going to resign.
Yeah, it sounds like you're really wrestling with this. I hear it in your voice. I mean, you said you thought about it a lot last night.
Well, what I'm angry about is I did express. People asked me, tried to do gotcha questions, are you supporting them? And I wouldn't. I said that I was concerned. I've spent my whole life fighting for people that have been, that are survivors of domestic assault and sexual assault. I have lived both in circumstances. And, you know, we got a sexual predator in the White House. I am concerned about that. But I think as Democrats, we got to fight fire with fire. But at the same time, there are certain values that we have to have and have to be willing to stand up to. And a lot of people were uncomfortable with doing that. And here we are today in the mess that we are in.
Right. Well, Congresswoman, I want to play what you said yesterday right after that news broke of that latest accusation.
I will always be concerned about domestic violence allegations, sexual assault allegations. But also, we got a man in the White House that's a predator, has been convicted of sexual assault, and people's lives are being impacted by this every single day. So it's a very complicated situation.
You said it was very complicated. What exactly did you mean by that? Were you at the time making a case for Platner possibly staying in the race?
No, what I was, Casey had asked me what I thought, and I said I'm processing it. I do believe that I'm not a voter in Maine. The people of Maine are the ones that have to decide. And at this point, you know, this isn't new. This is another revelation that fits into a pattern. But because I was so quickly asked, the people of Maine have until July 13th to have the ability to replace him on the ballot. I am wrestling with why did it take people so long to believe him? Why did people yell at me? And I was yelled at for saying what I said back in May and June. And I'm a strong, tough woman who's not afraid to stand up to people. So think about what it means to be a survivor and to tell a story and how people go after you. We are still living at a time that if women tell the truth, they are the ones that frequently get the repercussions. And we have to get to a point. Due process matters. Due process matters. But we also, women are afraid to come forward because of what the consequences are when you tell people what have happened.
Congresswoman, Platner says he's considering the best path forward. You just said that you think he should drop out. Do you think he will?
I don't know. Part of that, what you played, was also in response to the video that he recorded yesterday. And it sounded like he actually understands it's not about him. It's about the people of Maine and the Americans who need to have someone who is going to be electable and be able to stand up and not be a rubber stamp for what is happening. I am not a friend of his. I have not talked to him. I have people that have been friends of him who are very angry because they believe that he lied to him. I have no idea what he is going to do.
And so if he does drop out, where does the race go from here, you think? Should Democratic Party officials pick a new candidate?
I don't think the DSCC should. I think the people of Maine. They have a Democratic Party. They have, from what I'm hearing, many good candidates. The voters of Maine are the ones that should pick who they want to send to the United States Senate. That's what our democracy is. So I'm going to hope it's someone who doesn't have a history of domestic or sexual violence. But there are a lot of good candidates that I've heard. And I think the people of Maine and their leadership in the Democratic Party are the ones that should determine who they think is the strongest candidate.
And the uncertainty in Maine is now making the Democratic Senate race in your state of Michigan even more critical than it already was. So the race is now a showdown between Congresswoman Haley Stevens and the more progressive Abdul El-Sayed. Will you be endorsing in this race now that it's down to two candidates?
Absolutely will not be. I will stay neutral. I am one of those people that has to bring people together in August to remember what we are focused on in November. I know both of them. I know both of them will be able to defeat Mike Rogers. And one of them's a constituent, one of them's a colleague. This is a race that I have deep concerns about, and I am going to make sure that we win in Michigan in November. And this is a purple state. None of the elections in Michigan right now are a given. We are going to be competitive until Election Day.
I want to play one of the recent, or part of one of the recent attack ads against El-Sayed. Let's watch.
Abdul campaigned with anti-Israel radical Hassan Piker. He called to abolish private health insurance, and he's championing socialist tax hikes with Senator Bernie Sanders.
You just said that you believe both candidates can win. Do you think El-Sayed specifically, though, can weather those types of attacks?
He's going to have to be prepared to do so. But I do believe, look, I like both of these candidates. And I know that Donald Trump is loving using the word communist right now. And I don't think anyone's going to call me a democratic socialist, though I am a fighter. And I got to tell you, I lead the Medicare for All in the Congress. And the Dingells have been fighting for it for a long time. So some of the issues that they want to call socialist or communist, there are a lot of people who need health care in this country that can't get it. That's not a communist issue. That's an issue that everybody's got a right.
And Congresswoman, to that point, do you welcome these Democratic Socialist candidates who we've seen win in New York and Colorado into the party? Do you welcome them into the party and the Congressional Progressive Caucus, which you, of course, helped lead?
Well, I'm a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. I'm not a leader in it, so let's be clear on that. But the issues I care deeply about, we have a representative government. And I hate, by the way, all these labels that we see people use right now. But a representative government means that everybody's got a right to have somebody that reflects their voice at the table. Democrats have a big tent. America's got a big tent. Republicans have some people that I don't agree with. But it's important that everybody feel that there's somebody fighting for them at the table. This is who the district elected to send to Congress. I remember when everybody in the media tried to demonize AOC, and I didn't sponsor the Green New Deal because labor wasn't at the table. But she and I worked together, and we actually brought labor to the table with environmentalists and actually came to agreement on good policies. I think there's a lot of people, the media loves the story of let's pit people against each other, let's demonize. And I look forward to getting to know them. I'm going to agree with them on some things. I'm going to disagree with them on some things. I'm not somebody that's afraid to tell people where I stand and what my position is on an issue.
No doubt. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, thank you so much for your time.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.